The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are the favorites in the NFC South, but at least two teams in the division want to compete. We got all that coming up for you as the 2025 Locked On NFL season previews continue right now.
This is the 2025 Locked On NFL season preview, only on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back to the 2025 Locked On NFL season previews. And in this episode, we're taking a look at the NFC South. This episode brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Football season is around the corner, so visit FanDuel today and start planning your futures bets now. I'm Ross Jackson, host of the Locked On Saints podcast, and I'll be your host as we go through this division preview. Joining me are my colleagues from around the Locked On Podcast Network, including James Jarko of Locked On Bucks, Aaron Freeman of Locked On Falcons, and Julian Council of Locked On Panthers. Today, we're going to be taking a look at which teams are the biggest contenders, who's going to present the biggest challenge, the best players around the team, and who has been the most improved, and of course, give you our division predictions as well. So we have this enormous battle for the NFC South division, and we're all going to break it all down. So let's get started with the end. Who wins? We'll start off, of course, taking a look at the favorite, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I don't think any of us believe, and I'll say this outright, guys, you can tell me if you agree or disagree. I don't think any of these teams or any of us here are expecting anyone other than the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to win this division.
The Bucs are the favorites. I think we'll have a very good conversation about some teams that could potentially challenge it, but they are absolutely the front runners in the division.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the rest of the division right now, the only stability that you really have is Baker Mayfield back at quarterback for Tampa, Todd Bowles there again as the head coach. And I know they've changed out offensive coordinators, but that really hasn't stopped them from being a potent offense the last couple of years. And defensively, they got some questions, but they certainly have a lot of good pieces. So, yeah, it clearly should be Tampa that comes out on top of the NFC South again this fall.
James, I doubt you disagree.
No, I'm 100% on board as long as they stay healthy. Every time I go to do Locked On Bucks, I'm talking about another key player getting hurt. So if they can stay healthy, then yeah, I'm in total agreement that they are the favorite. That, as Julian said, the continuity of just having all the same leaders and everything. So it's it's their division to lose.
Yeah. No, it's massive to have that level of continuity. We used to enjoy that ourselves here in the great city of New Orleans, but it has not been the case as of late. And I think this next piece of the conversation, which Aaron alluded to, is probably the most important around the division, and that is who will present the biggest challenge to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And guys, I think I need to sit this one out because I don't think the New Orleans Saints are going to be competing for any divisions here, maybe for another couple of years. So Aaron, Julian, we'll start off with you as the highest ranked when it comes to the finishes last year. Why do the Falcons present the biggest challenge to the Bucs?
Well, the basic answer is the Falcons swept the Bucs last year. So on the football field, they proved that they were the better football team. Unfortunately, for the other 15 games, they did not prove that they were the better football team against those opponents, and that allowed the Bucs to come out on top with the Falcons doing the thing that they do every single year these last couple of years, which is they get off to a pretty good start, and by the end of October, we're like, oh, the Falcons are in first place in the NFC South, and then everything kind of fizzles, which certainly is not a trend with the Atlanta Falcons not being able to finish important things and whatnot and failing at the end of seasons and games or anything like that. But, the reason why it's going to be different this time is because they have a high-flying, explosive arm talent in Michael Penix Jr., and he's going to give them the caliber of quarterback play that they just haven't seen the last couple of years late in the season. And yeah, are they putting a lot on the plate of a second-year quarterback, a first-year full-time starter? Absolutely, but this is nothing new with the Atlanta Falcons. They've had a different starting quarterback for each of the last 4 seasons. They're going to have a different starting quarterback for the 5th year. And as I said, this time it's definitely going to be different, as the Falcons always put it together. So we'll see if Michael Penix can raise that offense to even higher levels when we saw them beat the Bucs with Kirk Cousins. And those were the best games of Kirk Cousins this season last year. And we'll also see if this young Falcons defense with some of the speed can slow down a team like Tampa Bay, who also put up a lot of points against a very bad Falcons defense, not quite as bad as the Carolina Panthers defense last year, but certainly one of the worst defenses in the NFL. Sorry, Julian, had to take that shot. But yeah, I think the Falcons really present the biggest challenge to the Bucs just because they were able to take care of business on the field in those 2 games.
Yeah. Yeah, Atlanta is a tough one to buy into just based off of a lot of what Aaron said about them not being able to finish things, which, I mean, never forget they blew 28-3 lead in the Super Bowl.
That's what it was. I was trying to remember where that came from. I remember that being a thing from somewhere.
Jokes aside, though, I do like Michael Penix a lot. And last time we saw him was against Bryce Young in that Week 18 game down in Atlanta, and he was cooking. Now, yes, it was against literally the worst defense in the history of the NFL, if we're talking about scoring defense with the Panthers defense, but he's got the goods, and he has some talent on the outside, which is always helpful. So I think offensively, like, they should be able to put up some numbers. It's just, so they're going to have a pass rush. It's James Pierce Jr. He's going to be able to get it done. Jalen Walker, 2 Charlotte area guys. Can they have the kind of impact we saw last year in LA when you look at what Jared Verse did on the outside, and then even looking at Braden Fisk as an interior guy? If they can have that kind of impact on the Falcons defensive line, at least the pass rush this upcoming season, like, that puts them in position. And unlike the other teams in the division, like, the backup quarterback situation is probably the best. I don't think anyone thinks Kirk Cousins is a high-level starting quarterback in the league anymore, but he's certainly better than whoever New Orleans puts out there as their backup, certainly better than Kyle Trask and better than Andy Dalton. So if something does happen to Baker Mayfield, God forbid, like, or something happens to Michael Penix Jr., like, they at least can stay afloat, unlike I think the rest of the teams in this division. Maybe Andy Dalton for 1 week in Carolina, but after that, not going to happen.
Yeah.
Of course, like, the Panthers go, like, if they're going to push to win this division, like, they have to be better defensively. Like, that goes without really needing to be said. Derek Brown coming back is a huge piece of that. I think that they've added pieces in the interior defensive line, like Bobby Brown III, who comes over from the Rams, also bringing in Turk Wharton, that elevates the depth that they did not have a year ago. So if they can have the impact with those 2 guys that they had on the offensive line last year with Damian Lewis and also Robert Hunt, then there can be a stabilizing force there on the defensive line and on the offensive line. And that's really where it starts off. I know we've talked a lot about quarterbacks and all of that. I mean, it doesn't really matter if they're on their back the entire time and if they don't have guys to throw to. Like, if you don't win in the trenches, you're not winning at this level. So I think Carolina's going to be better stopping the run this season. But it just kind of comes down to, will Bryce Young be the same Bryce we saw in the second half of the season, or will there be more of the peaks and valleys that we had seen early on in his career? So I wouldn't necessarily bet on Carolina to push Tampa. Like, the schedule's interesting because 2 of their last 3 games are against the Bucs. So if they are in it, like, obviously Tampa's going to be in it. Like, those 2 games could mean a lot at the end of the season once we get to the end of December and early January.
Yeah. All right, James, you've been very patient here. Which of these 2 teams, Atlanta and Carolina, present the biggest challenge to Tampa from your perspective?
I mean, I think it is Atlanta, though. I was a Michael Penix skeptic going into the draft when the Falcons took him, so I'm not sure if I'm sold on him or not.
Disgusting behavior, by the way.
You know what? If I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but, you know, more often than not, I'm not wrong. Other than that, I mean, Atlanta's offense poses all kinds of threats. They have by far the best running back in the division, arguably one of the best running backs in the league. I love Drake London. I would be shocked if Kyle Pitts did anything, but, you know, that's a discussion for another day. But I'm also really concerned about all the upgrades they made on the defensive side of the ball. Julian, you mentioned a couple of them. The other one that had me throwing things against the wall in my office was Xavier Watts. He was a guy that I absolutely loved. And, you know, he's an absolute ball hawk. So if he sees the field, they already have Jesse Bates like that, that is concerning. But my biggest question is, can Penix get it done? I'm also not going to be surprised if the Panthers end up with a better record than the Falcons. I think the Panthers are a sneaky good team this year. I was really encouraged by what we saw down the stretch at the end of last season. And Julian, as you said, they have to be able to put it together defensively. We're talking about, you know, turning around an all-time worst, you know, defense, but that's going to take a little bit of time. But offensively, I love what Bryce and Canales were doing there down the stretch. I love the addition of Tet McMillan. I think the Panthers can really surprise some people this year.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I completely agree with you there, James. I think the Panthers are a sneaky good team. I think Atlanta poses the biggest threat right now, but I won't be surprised if we're talking about Carolina presenting the biggest threat come week 12, week 11. You know what I mean? Like that kind of a thing. If they get everything kind of churning in their direction, I can see Carolina being a much better team than a lot of people expect. All right, coming up next, because we're far from done here, we'll be taking a look at our NFL Top 100 that we did here at Locked On, which includes a number of players from all four of these teams, but some big names we're certainly missing. Let's get to that next as we continue on with the 2025 Locked On NFL season preview here with the NFC South.
This episode is brought to you by our friends over there at Prize Picks, the daily fantasy platform that lets you turn your football predictions into real rewards. Preseason is already heating up and college football is not far behind. Whether you've got your eye on big-name quarterbacks or even breakout running backs this season, Prize Picks makes it easy to get in on the game. Plus, they offer weekly flyer options already for week 1, where Dak Prescott's max discount for kickoff against the Eagles is more than 0.5 passing yards. Take advantage of that inside of the Prize Picks app today. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDON NFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDON NFL for $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. Prize Picks, run your game.
All right, everybody, continuing on with our Locked On NFL 2025 NFL preview here. Take a look at the NFC South. Myself, James Jarko of Locked On Bucks, Aaron Freeman over at Locked On Falcons, Julian Council of Locked On Panthers, and of course, I host Locked On Saints. Guys, we did our first ever NFL Top 100 here at Locked On. We have our I voted stickers that we were given as well for those of for the folks that voted on the polls. And so if you didn't vote, not a lot of opportunity to complain, but I think that everyone here contributed. And so with that, I'm curious about what your thoughts are on the players that were selected from the NFC South. We have a long list here that includes the top-ranked guy being Tristan Wirfs, the offensive tackle from the Bucs, Bijan Robinson, who James referenced just a moment ago as being one of the best running backs in the league. He also rounds out in the top at number 34. It's the second highest ranked. Then you've got players like Baker Mayfield, Alvin Kamara, Chris Lindstrom, Mike Evans, and more that are here. A couple of Panthers from 75, J.C. Horn, as well as 98, Derek Brown. So let's start off with just the talent in this division. The NFC South is often noted as one of the worst divisions in football right now. Is this division more talented than people think that it might be from the exterior perspective? Julian, what are your thoughts on sort of the talent within the division?
I don't know if I would say that, honestly, because like what influx of talent have we seen come in recently that would elevate them from those recent rankings? Like maybe for Carolina, McMillan eventually could be up there. Certainly we can go 8th overall. The expectation is that one day you will be one of the better receivers, but there's a ton of receiving talent that comes in the league every single year, whether you're a first rounder or you can be a 4th rounder, go 5th round and all of that. So I think it's hard to say that. I mean, it is interesting. Like a guy like Vita Vea is not up there from Tampa Bay. Like, I mean, I do think that Derek Brown is one of the better defensive tackles. And we see even with the other top 100 that's out there that if you didn't play the previous year, then your ranking kind of goes down. Like Derek set NFL records literally for tackles by a defensive lineman when he was a Pro Bowler back in 2023. So I think he might be a little bit better than that. But I don't know if the overall talent level is that great in the NFC South at this point in time. But I think there's some young talent, but it's just, is it top 100 talent? Probably not.
Yeah. James, what do you think about the omission of Vita Vea?
I thought the omission of Vita Vea and Levante David was criminal. I mean, and I understand that I'm going to look at this through a somewhat biased lens, but, you know, it's hard to deny the longevity and the production of a guy like Levante David, who's still doing it at an incredibly high level. And then Vita Vea, you know, is one of the best defensive tackles in the NFL. So I thought that was wild, especially, and not to throw shade at anybody that voted, but why is Travis Hunter like in the top 70 when he's never
we hadn't even seen him?
I need accountability for who voted for this guy. Because
a lot of people apparently for him to be that high.
Apparently enough. Well,
or just a couple of people voted him super high to counter all the rest of us that didn't even have him on there. So, but to Julian's point, I think this division is more talented than people give it credit for, because we are missing guys like Vita and Levante in the top 100. But, you know, just to speak on the team that I cover, you know, Bucky Irving is an emerging young superstar. You have Emeka Ibuka, who is making headlines all over the place. He's right there with Ted. He's got to prove it, but there's a lot of expectations there. So you do have some of these younger guys that don't get quite the attention yet. But I think the influx of young talent is what makes the NFC South better than what people think it truly is. That, and it's not the way that it used to be, right? We don't have marquee quarterbacks in this division. There's no Drew Breeses, there's no Cam Newtons, there's no Tom Brady's. Yeah, there's no even Matt Ryan's. No disrespect to Matt Ryan, but he wasn't quite the name as the other.
He was the MVP of the league, though. Let's not hate.
He was. Brady should have been the MVP in 2021. That's another discussion. So we should all be representing teams with MVP quarterbacks. But, I think that also in the public eye knocks it down a notch, just because there isn't that superstar power at the most important position on the field.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. I think that's part of the reason why. It's like when you watch, like there's folks that rank rosters and everything, but they're not really ranking the rosters. They're ranking the quarterbacks. Like that's usually what happens in those situations. And there's not really that marquee quarterback, as you said, James, in the NFC South anymore, or at least at this point. Maybe Michael Penix Jr. can become that guy. Maybe Baker Mayfield continues to ascend in a way that gets there. Maybe Bryce Young becomes one of those guys. We'll see what happens with the quarterback situation in New Orleans. But until you have sort of that marquee name at in your division at the most important position in football, you're probably not going to be considered one of the better divisions in football. Even if you actually are performing pretty well as a division, or at least you're competitive as a division, you're just not going to get that recognition. I think one of the big omissions from the Saints perspective, Saints had 2 players on the top 100, honestly more than I thought that they were going to have, but Alvin Kamara and then Chris Olave were both on there. I thought Eric McCoy was the one guy that actually I thought was going to be on the list. Probably one of the better centers in the NFL. But outside of that, I didn't really have a lot of guys. He was the only one that I put in my voting from the team in the top 100, although I was super close to putting Alvin Kamara in like the bottom 90 somewhere. But I wanted to see what was going to happen with him with this new offense and all the changes and things like that. But outside of that, like New Orleans actually, I feel like came out overrepresented in this list over my expectation. Aaron, how did you feel about the top 100 from the Falcons perspective?
I think the top 100 for the most part got it right with the players that they put in. Whether I agree quite with the rankings of those players, like I feel like Jesse Bates is arguably the best safety in the NFL and probably should be a lot higher than 96 on this list. But I think they got it mostly right with the Falcons players. The one player that was borderline for me, I did not personally put him in my top 100, but if I was going to advocate for someone from the Falcons that did not appear in the top 100 to be in the top 100, it would be AJ Terrell, based off of what we have seen him at the height of his abilities in the NFL. But we haven't seen that same version of AJ Terrell the last couple of years. So I understand why other people did not put him in the top 100. I wouldn't have put him in the top 100 based off of more recency bias. And that's always the interesting thing when it comes to these top 100s like this, where it's like you're talking about recency bias. There's no bias when it comes to Travis Hunter being in it without playing in the league. Derek Brown is in the top 100, even though he's coming off an injury-plagued season. But Vita Vea played a really good season last year, but it's not in the top 100. So we get all these different hosts that have different perspectives on this top 100. And it's like, oh, we're only factoring, like Baker Mayfield was not in my top 100, not because Baker Mayfield isn't coming off in one of his best seasons of the NFL, but I'm like, he did it for 1 year in Tampa Bay, was still a very volatile quarterback, but the highs were very high, obviously. And that's not necessarily a top 100 quarterback to me, but obviously a lot of people saw the type of success that Baker Mayfield had this past year and put him in the top 100, again, based off of that recency bias. And so you get differing perspectives when it comes to this top 100, the idea being that we get, the 40 plus hosts in the NFL side and collectively we'll come up with a good consensus. But as we've discussed today, like even then the consensus isn't quite always hitting in all these marks.
Yeah,
I thought Baker's been good the last couple of years. Like,
yeah, I had Baker in my top 100.
Yeah, I think that he certainly is deserving based on what he's done the last 2 years. I think as far as just the NFC South goes, you talk about McCoy, Ross. I don't know how many people are really breaking down center play like that.
Right.
And it's not 100%. Like, he has a podcast and he's playing. Like, if Jason Kelce is still playing, whether people know whether he's a good player or not, he probably is in the top 100 just based off of his Q score. Like, that's kind of how these things work a lot of the times. Not to say anything bad about anybody who like voted, but like, I mean, let's be honest. I don't think people are really breaking down center tape like that. Like Vita Vea is probably the only one like in this division you can really look at and say, okay, that guy is definitely a top 100 player. And I honestly was a little surprised that, I mean, JC Horn was a Pro Bowler last year. He's missed a lot of time. Like he is, if he is able to play, like I think one of the better corners in the league. I think he's better than AJ Terrell if they're both out there healthy. I was actually surprised he was as high as 75. I thought Derek Brown was the guy who should have been up there higher than JC, but it was kind of cool or interesting at least to see that he got that recognition from folks around the league. So yeah, I think Vita Vea really is the only omission that anyone should have any sort of I don't even know the word, should be upset about, I suppose.
Just just like, recognition or whatever, right? That sometimes it's like Pro Bowl voting, right? What name do you know and all these other pieces? 100%. Look, there might be some new players and new faces that could jump onto this list for each of these teams going into 2026. And so on that note, coming up next, what we're going to take a look at is the team that was the most improved going out of 2025, going into out of 2024 and into 2025, and where some of those improvements happen. And of course, we'll give you our division finish predictions as well. We got that coming up for you next as we wrap up the Locked On NFL 2025 season preview here with the NFC South.
Today's 2025 NFL season preview is brought to you by our friends over there at FanDuel Sportsbook. And as you all know, FanDuel, they are America's #1 sportsbook. And right now, with the NFL season right around the corner, they want to get you in the game with an offer that you simply can't miss, because new users can bet just $5 and win up to $300 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. And you can use that all across the app for NFL season futures. You can even go through what I do on my Sunday morning routine. I like to pull up my phone, go into the FanDuel Sportsbook app, and then I'll go through the morning games. I'll pick all the money lines, and then the primetime slate, I'll go through and I'll do player props and parlay them together inside of FanDuel. That's part of my routine. But FanDuel, once again, wants to make sure if you sign up today as a brand new customer, you bet $5, your first bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets guaranteed. So make sure you check it out. Are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com.
All right, everybody, continuing on with the 2025 Locked On NFL season preview here with the NFC South. We took a look at who presents the biggest challenge to the division favorite when it comes to those Tampa Bay Buccaneers right now, plus 100 to win the division with our friends over at FanDuel. We took a look at some of the best players and biggest names within the division. Now let's talk about some of the new players that have kind of stepped in. And I'll start us off here because, or not just new players, but new faces. I'll start us off here because I think New Orleans maybe has had the biggest and most amount of change going from 2024 to 2025. They flipped their entire coaching staff with some, a couple of different exceptions. So new head coach, new defensive coordinator, new special teams coordinator, new position coaches all over the place. And of course, Derek Carr and his surprise retirement. I'll tell you guys, him not being on the roster in 2025 was not a surprise, but him retiring was very much a surprise. And then there were like two other surprise retirements here in New Orleans as well, Tyrann Mathieu, and then a second-year tight end, Dallin Holker. He had just finished up his rookie season and he retired. And so we're seeing a little bit of that going on here in New Orleans, a 9-person draft class, which is unheard of here in the city. And so I think whether or not New Orleans is the most improved remains to be seen. But I definitely think that they are the team that has experienced the most change. So when you look at the New Orleans Saints and you see that amount of change, does it strike you as, hey, they might be building something? Or do you see it as, oh, they're in turmoil because everything is new and different? James, why don't we start with you there?
I talked to an ESPN radio station in Lafayette. And I was like, if I'm a Saints fan right now, I am totally fine with completely being terrible this year. I am completely punting this year because I think the youth and kind of that next gen of Saints players, in addition to the coaching staff changes, that has me really excited for the future. I don't care about Shuck. I don't care about Rattler. My quarterback is coming in 2026. So I think the Saints are a really interesting team from the fact that I expect them to do nothing this year, but be one of those teams that goes from having the #1 pick or a top 3 pick to a postseason berth within 2 years is absolutely in the realm of possibility. So as much as it pains me to say, because the Saints were on top of the division for so long and now they've been chilling at the bottom and it's been a nice change, I don't think they're staying there much longer, because I do think they have a really bright future. And if I'm a Saints fan, I'm encouraged by everything that they've done outside of what's going on at quarterback.
Yeah, one of the big things that I keep telling everybody is when I get the questions about like, oh, how do Saints fans feel about how things are going in New Orleans? I say, well, there's no longer Dennis Allen and there's no longer Derek Carr, so everybody feels pretty good because that's kind of all anybody here wanted was a change away from those guys. Aaron,
Derek
Julian, yeah, right. Look, that experience was not the greatest experience. Actually, let's table the Saints conversation because I'm really curious, Aaron, Julian, how it is that you all look at how your teams have improved over the course of this offseason. Julian, let's start with you. Do you feel the improvement so far for Carolina?
Won't be able to feel it until week 1, to be honest, Ross.
Sure.
I've been out there and like, I'm just not somebody who's going to take a lot out of what I see in training camp. Cause I mean, last year I thought Bryce Young looked improved. He came out and he looked terrible in the first 2 weeks. So I'm not taking anything from what I saw from the starters during joint practice against the Browns, the 1 or 2 series they played against the Browns and the Texans. I just look at the roster and think like, okay, they should be improved in certain spots if guys do what they're hoping they're going to do. And like in years past, this happens with every team. Like they were asking DJ Chark to come in and be one of their top receivers after they decided to trade away DJ Moore to get in position, to draft Bryce Young. And DJ Chark didn't do that. So we'll see if they're in like Miles Sanders, same guy they brought in to come in, be their starting running back. He didn't do that. So if guys come in and do the job that they're expecting and hoping for them to do, then yeah, like they should be improved. As I mentioned earlier, like Bobby Brown III, known run stopper from his time in Los Angeles. That should help with Derek Brown being back and A'Shaun Robinson also being in the fold again. Turk Wharton can add another element they didn't have in years past as an interior pass rusher. He was one of the top pass rushers on Kansas City last year on their march to the Super Bowl. And then you look at Jerron Mary coming in. Safety was a big concern for them last year, especially just tackling, just doing simple things like that. He can do that. I mean, you bring back the entire offensive line, so they should take another step forward, and the depth is there as well. And we'll see what they have at receiver. Like, I look at that group and think that they're really intriguing, really talented, but the only guy you can look at and know what you're going to get from him is Adam Thielen. He's also 35 years old. Hunter Renfro's look kind of nice, but Hunter hasn't really been healthy since 2021, was dealing with the ulcerative colitis that had him sit out last season. So we'll see what that Xavier Legette didn't really impress me last year, but he's back this year. Will he take that next step? Tyrell McMillan's never played a game in the NFL, so we don't really know what he's going to do. Like, there's a lot of potential there, but if you're sitting here saying like, oh, that's going to be a top 10 wide receiver unit in the NFL, like you can't base that off of anything other than like the potential what they have in that room. And even I feel like this year, like that's a big stretch and like who is Bryce Young really going to be? So I think just as far as the trenches go on the defensive side of the ball, they should be improved. Everywhere else, it's kind of TBD.
Aaron, are the improvements over on the defensive side of the football while Carolina is sort of in this wait and see moment? I mean, is there enough excitement there in Atlanta to say, yeah, this is an improved team?
There's plenty of excitement in Atlanta about this team being improved, whether it's similar, echoing the same veins as Julian Council, whether we see that week 1 when they get on the field and have to slow down Baker Mayfield in this Bucs offense, we will have to sort of see. But there have been certainly lots of investments on that side of the ball. The Falcons basically are running it back with virtually the same offense across the board, with the exception swapping out Kirk Cousins for Michael Penix, swapping out their starting center Drew Dahlman for Ryan Uzel, as Dahlman left to go to Chicago for a more lucrative contract. And they're basically saying, hey, Michael Penix basically is going to solve all of our offensive problems, and that's why this offense is going to be, potentially one of the top 10 offenses. And you certainly see the potential ceiling of that. Again, can they deliver on that? And then really, they're expecting their defense to just be complimentary, just be decent. Don't be bad. Don't be a bottom 5 defense, which is what they were last year. And if you can just hover somewhere, around 20th with a top 5, top 10 offense, hey, that's their formula for success. I think they have added enough pieces that they could potentially get there, but they're betting a lot on a bunch of young players. And historically speaking, young players tend to be very up and down. And then they're also betting on a bunch of aging veterans that have shown clearer signs of decline the last couple of years, whether you're looking at former New Orleans Saints David Onyemata, defensive tackle, edge rusher that they picked up this offseason, Leonard Floyd, among others. Caden Ellis is now past the age of 30, but has been an ascending player these last couple of years. Is Father Time going to catch up to him at this point in time? Those are some of the open questions with this Falcons defense. And again, I think they've added enough where you can squint and you say, this could get to the 20th best defense in the NFL. And that gets a lot of people excited about what this defense can be potentially, given the history of the Falcons having terrible defenses for most of the last, decade. And certainly some of the worst, if not the worst pass rush for 14 decades or however many long time goes back when it comes to the sport of football, because it seems like every year that they play professional football, the Atlanta Falcons are dead last in the NFL in sacks. But I guess technically it's only 20 years instead of 140 years. But I think right now they've made a lot of investments in that pass rush, and people are optimistic about the future. But whether these young guys are going to deliver immediately, I think that remains an open question.
Yeah,
squinting real hard, huh?
It freaks me out that Caden Ellis is going into his age 30 season, by the way, or is about to cross the age of 30. That's kind of crazy to me. James, how improved are the Bucs, or is the continuity the most important part for them outside of the changes on the coaching staff?
Well, I would say that there are some significant improvements. Last year, there was obvious problems with injuries, especially on the defensive side of the ball, and the lack of depth at secondary really hurt on. They were pulling parking lot attendants into the stadium, at 12:45 to suit up and start at outside corner. So you go out and you get Hassan Reddick. They were missing that edge presence. Joe Tryon-Shoyinka never panned out. So now you have that compliment for Yaya Diaby on the other side, but you go out and you draft Benjamin Morrison, who should have been a first-round pick, missed most of his last year at Notre Dame because of hip surgery, and you get Jacob Parrish, who's going to be a day one starter at slot corner for the Bucs. You get those guys and you allow Tyke Smith to move back to safety, whereas last year he was the slot corner. So you have some upgrades going on there on the defensive side. Servassier Dennis, he's entering his third year. He's never been healthy. He has had an injured shoulder since he was in college. That gets surgically repaired. So we finally get a healthy Servassier Dennis. Hopefully he stays healthy. I mean, who knows at the rate they're going. Chris Godwin starting on the pup. Jalen McMillan's going to miss half the season with a neck injury. Tristan Wirfs is going to miss the first month of the season. So they're missing key guys. So Aaron, our crossover to start the season is going to be electric because the Bucs aren't going to have anybody healthy to start the year. But they have gone out of their way to try to make these improvements and to upgrade the secondary and allow Todd Bowles to do what he does, which is not something he could do all last season because the personnel just wasn't there. But outside of that, obviously the continuity is massive, especially once Tristan Wirfs returns and you have that entire offensive line returning. They did such a great job protecting Baker and opening lanes for Bucky Irving.
All right, let's wrap this up with a look at the way that the division will end in 2025. We'll make our, honestly, way too early predictions on this, but why not have a little fun? We'll go in division finish order from last year. James, we'll start with you just real quick. Let's go starting with the division winner down to who's last. How do you see the division shaking out?
I'll go chalk. Tampa, Atlanta, Carolina, New Orleans.
Easy way to go. I don't blame you at all. Aaron, how about you?
Ditto. Tampa, Atlanta, Carolina, New Orleans.
Julian, any change?
I got Tampa, and then I have Carolina and Atlanta tying, and then I have New Orleans last.
Who wins the tiebreaker?
Who's drafting earlier? I'm not worried about all that.
Is that based off like strength of schedule, which it's going to be impossible to know that until January.
It could be head to head.
Right.
Yeah, but it's not going to be head to head. I don't think that either team's going to sweep.
Yeah. Well, I'll go. I'm going Tampa. And then I was actually going to do the same thing, Julian. I was going to go Atlanta and Carolina tying, with Atlanta getting the tiebreaker. And so it would put technically Atlanta second. But I think Carolina, same record, and then the Saints down at the bottom, which I think every Saints fan should be happy about, because every Saints fan has been waiting for this New Orleans Saints team for the past couple of years to embrace a rebuild, and it's finally here. This is like a 34 game season. It's not a 17 game season.
Except Mickey Loomis still has a job, so it's not a full rebuild.
Well, but It has been. Like he'll never say that it has been, but it's a new coach, it's a new court. Like everything's different, everything's changed. The entire coaching staff is different. I don't know how you don't call this a rebuild outside of just not using the word. But you can not use the word all you want, Mickey. It's a rebuild, buddy. It's a rebuild, and it's very, very clear. All right, we appreciate you very much for coming through for our 2025 Locked On NFL season preview. I am Ross Jackson, host of Locked On Saints. You can find more on the Bucs from James Jarko over at Locked On Bucs, the Falcons over with Aaron Freeman at Locked On Falcons, and of course the Panthers with Julian Council over at Locked On Panthers every single Monday through Friday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Make sure you go and check out those shows and stick around as well to be able to catch everything going on across how all the divisions might be playing out. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On NFL wherever you get your podcast. Part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.